that simply arises out of the blue. It doesn't happen in a vacuum. When someone hates you, it's often because they don't understand you. People don't just wake up one day with hatred in their hearts. Hatred is birthed from misunderstanding. It's born out of fear, jealousy, or even insecurity. And sometimes it's not about you at all. It's about the internal battles that the other person is fighting within themselves. You see, hatred often reflects the wounds of the person hating, not the person being hated. We live in a world where perception is reality. People will judge you not by who you truly are, but by how they perceive you. If you're successful, confident, or living a life they envy, your very presence can become a threat to their reality. And because of that, they may begin to hate you, not because of your actions, but because of what they think your success says about them. In the eyes of some, your success can highlight their insecurities, their failures, or their unfulfilled dreams. And so their hearts turn cold and they begin to resent you, even though they may not fully understand your journey or the sacrifices you've made. When people hate, it's not always about something you've done. More often than not, it's about something inside them. People who hate are often people who are struggling with themselves. Their anger and resentment are born out of their inability to face their own demons. Your confidence, your success, or your peace may just be a painful reminder of what they haven't been able to achieve, and that can breed hatred. So I ask you, are they hating you, or are they hating the version of themselves that they wish they could be? Jealousy is a silent killer. It's an emotion that breeds hatred like wildfire. When someone sees you living your truth, standing tall in your purpose, there will always be those who are envious. Jealousy makes people wish for what you have without knowing the full story. They want your success, your peace, or your happiness, but they fail to realize the price you paid for it. Remember this: people don't hate what they don't envy. The more you rise, the more others may feel the need to tear you down. But let me tell you, jealousy is not a reflection of your value, but a reflection of their lack of peace. The truth is, hatred often comes from unresolved issues, disagreements, misunderstandings, past hurts that have not been addressed. These conflicts linger in the hearts of individuals, and without resolution, they fester into hatred. If there's someone in your life who harbors resentment towards you, don't be quick to judge them. Instead, seek to understand the root of their pain. Healing begins with understanding, and understanding requires patience. Hatred can often be a reflection of the other person's ego. People's egos are fragile. If your success or your character somehow challenges their perception of themselves, they may react with animosity. Your value is not diminished by their inability to recognize it. One of the greatest tools we have in overcoming hatred is open, honest communication. Misunderstandings breed hatred, and sometimes all it takes is a conversation to clear the air. Often people hate what they don't understand. If you find yourself at odds with someone, reach out. Try to understand their perspective. You'll be surprised how many walls of hatred crumble when the truth is shared. People hate when others refuse to take responsibility for their actions. If you've wronged someone, own up to it. If you've made mistakes, admit them. People respect humility and they despise arrogance. When you are accountable for your actions, even your detractors will find it hard to hold on to their hatred. The only way to overcome hatred, both from others and within yourself, is to forgive. Hatred chains you to the past, to anger, to resentment. But forgiveness sets you free. When you forgive, you let go of the poison that hatred brings. Forgiveness doesn't mean you're condoning someone's actions. It means you're freeing yourself from the burden of bitterness. So why do people hate you? Maybe it's because they don't understand you. Maybe it's because they're threatened by your light. Maybe it's because they're struggling with their own wounds. Whatever the reason, don't let it define you. You are not their hatred. You are not their bitterness. You are not their insecurity. Remember this, hatred is not your problem, it's theirs. And when you understand that, you can live in peace, walk in love, and never let the hate of others shape your destiny. Hatred is not an emotion that appears out of nowhere. It is a response To truly understand why people hate, we must first explore the underlying causes that fuel this destructive feeling. More often than not, hatred emerges from a place of misunderstanding. People are not born hating others. They are shaped by their experiences, beliefs, fears, and insecurities. Hatred, at its core, is a reaction to something that feels threatening or unsettling. And what feels threatening may not always be what you've done, but what someone perceives you to represent. When someone hates, it's often because they don't fully understand the person they are directing their feelings toward. Perhaps they don't understand your choices, your actions, or your success. They might interpret these things in a way that causes them to feel inferior or inadequate in comparison. The mind creates narratives that protect the ego. And when something doesn't fit into those narratives, something they can't explain or come to terms with, it becomes a target for their anger. In many cases, hatred is a projection. It is a reflection of what the person who hates is struggling with inside themselves. When someone feels threatened by your strength, your confidence, or even your happiness, it might reveal their own insecurities, their own fears. Instead of confronting these feelings, they may turn outward, casting blame and resentment onto you. You become a scapegoat for everything they wish they could change about themselves, but haven't found the courage to confront. Hatred often arises from a deep sense of fear. Fear of the unknown, fear of failure, or fear of loss. When people see you succeeding or living your truth, they might fear that it challenges their own sense of security or self-worth. Their fear can cause them to react in ways that seem irrational, as they lash out to protect themselves from what they perceive as a threat to their own stability or identity. Sometimes hatred stems from unresolved emotional pain, past hurts, betrayals, or disappointments that have never been addressed. These emotional wounds fester over time, and they can make it difficult for someone to view others through an objective lens. Instead, their pain clouds their judgment, and they begin to associate their negative emotions with others, even if those others have not directly caused the harm. In these instances, the person's hatred is not really about you, it's about the unhealed wounds from their past. At the heart of it all, hatred is often less about what you have done and more about what the other person is unable to confront within themselves. It's an expression of their inner turmoil, their fears, and their unresolved issues. Understanding this can help us not to take hatred personally, as we realize that it's a reflection of their internal struggles. Recognizing that hatred often has very little to do with our actions and everything to do with someone else's internal battles allows us to approach the situation with compassion and a desire for healing rather than reacting in kind with anger or bitterness. Perception is often more powerful than reality. It's a concept that shapes our interactions, our judgments, and our relationship. The way people see you, the way they interpret your actions, and the way they filter the world around them can become a far more influential force than the actual reality of who you are or what you've done. Our perception is not just a passive process of seeing. It's a lens shaped by our past experiences, beliefs, biases, and emotional states. How others perceive you is, in many ways, a reflection of who they are. When someone looks at you, they don't simply see you for who you are. They see a version of you that fits into their narrative, one that aligns with their own story, their own insecurities, or their own desires. The way they interpret your success, your words, your choices, or even your very presence may have very little to do with the reality of your intentions or character. If they're insecure, they may view your confidence as arrogance. If they're struggling, they may see your success as a reminder of their own perceived failures. This misalignment between how people perceive you and who you truly are can be a fertile ground for negativity and conflict. For example, let's say you're thriving in your career, advancing, achieving goals, and living a life you've worked hard for. To you, this may simply be the result of your dedication and effort, but to someone who feels stagnant in their own life, your success can appear as though you're showing off, flaunting, or somehow making them feel less than. They may take your actions personally, interpreting them through the filter of their own unspoken frustrations, instead of seeing the reality that your success is not about diminishing them, but about honoring your own growth and hard work. This is the danger of perception. It creates a false narrative that can distort the truth. Perceptions can be built on incomplete information. When we judge others based on limited experiences or interactions, we form opinions that are often shallow and misleading. Maybe someone hears rumors about you, or maybe they've only seen one side of your story, and from that they form a negative judgment. They don't take the time to understand the full picture, to get to know the complexity of who you are or the reasons behind your actions. The result is a perception that doesn't align with a deeper reality. This can lead to misunderstanding and eventually resentment. The most difficult part of perception is that it can feel real. Even though it's based on assumptions or incomplete data, it still has the power to affect relationships and influence how people treat one another. Once a perception takes root, it becomes a kind of truth in the eyes of those who hold it. If someone perceives you as arrogant or unkind, it doesn't matter if you've done nothing to deserve that label. What matters is that they believe it to be true. And as long as they hold that perception, it becomes a barrier to meaningful connection, understanding, and growth. This disconnect between perception and reality can be especially painful when it leads to hatred or animosity. When people don't take the time to understand you, when they refuse to look beyond their limited perspective, they miss the opportunity to know the real you. They are trapped in their perception while you remain misunderstood. This is why it's important to challenge perceptions, to create spaces for open dialogue and deeper understanding. It's not enough to simply exist in the world. We must also work to communicate who we truly are and give others the opportunity to see us clearly. At the same time, it's also important to recognize that perception is not something we always have control over. No matter how transparent or genuine we are, some people will form opinions about us based on their own experiences, biases, and emotions. In these situations, it's crucial to understand that while we can't control how others perceive us, we can control how we react to it. We don't need to internalize the misperceptions or let them define us. What matters most is staying true to who we are, regardless of how others choose to see us. And over time, the truth has a way of revealing itself. Perception, though powerful, is never stronger than reality. Self-reflection is an essential part of personal growth, and yet it's often one of the most challenging practices. It requires us to take an honest look at ourselves, our thoughts, actions, motivations, and the way we interact with the world around us. It's about being willing to examine not only what we do, but why we do it, and being brave enough to confront uncomfortable truths. We can often look outward to understand the reasons why others react the way they do, but it's far more transformative to look inward and understand how we might be contributing to those reactions. When people hate us, it's easy to immediately point fingers and assign blame. But the most powerful question to ask ourselves in those moments is, how have I contributed to this situation? Sometimes the anger or resentment others feel toward us might not be entirely our fault, but it's important to recognize the role we play in the dynamics of our relationships. Have we unknowingly hurt someone? Have we allowed misunderstandings to fester without addressing them? Have we acted in ways that might provoke jealousy, insecurity, or resentment in others, even if that wasn't our intention? Self-reflection means being accountable for our actions, even when it's uncomfortable. It's about acknowledging our own imperfections and being open to the possibility that we've made mistakes along the way. It's easy to fall into the trap of believing that our actions are always justified and that the fault lies entirely with others. But true growth comes when we are willing to take ownership of our behaviors, no matter how painful it may be. Reflecting on our actions helps us see the impact we have on others, whether we intended it or not. In doing so, we open the door to healing and improvement. It's also important to reflect on our internal motivations. Are we truly acting from a place of authenticity? Or are we driven by a desire for validation, approval, or control? Sometimes we project confidence or success outwardly not because it reflects our true selves, but because we're seeking external validation to fill a void inside. If we're motivated by insecurity or the need for recognition, it's possible that others will sense that energy and react accordingly. When we look inward, we can examine whether our actions are coming from a place of genuine self-assurance, or if we're unconsciously trying to meet someone else's expectations. By understanding our true motivations, we can begin to change the way we move through the world and interact with others in a more authentic and aligned way. Self-reflection also requires us to examine our biases and assumptions. We all have filters through which we view the world, shaped by our upbringing, experiences, and culture. Sometimes these filters can distort the way we see others and ourselves. If we hold on to prejudices or make judgments without fully understanding the context, we risk perpetuating negative patterns in our interactions. When we reflect on the biases that shape our perceptions, we can begin to let go of outdated or harmful beliefs and create more space for empathy and understanding. Self-reflection calls us to explore our emotional reactions. How do we respond when faced with criticism or conflict? Do we become defensive, or do we take a step back and process the emotions that arise? Often, our reactions to external circumstances can tell us a lot about our inner state. If we are quick to anger or closed off to feedback, it might be a sign that we have unresolved issues or triggers that need attention. Through self-reflection, we can uncover these emotional patterns and work to transform them, rather than letting them control our responses. The power of self-reflection lies in its ability to help us grow and evolve. It allows us to shift from being reactive to being proactive in our relationships and interactions. When we take the time to reflect on ourselves, we create space for learning and improvement. This doesn't mean we have to be perfect. It means we are willing to recognize our shortcomings, adjust our behavior, and strive to be better. By doing so, we not only improve ourselves, but also enhance our relationships with others. Self-reflection allows us to move through the world with greater understanding, compassion, and intention, ultimately helping us build stronger, more meaningful connections with the people around us. Insecurity is a powerful and often invisible force that shapes the way we interact with others. It can manifest in many forms, through self-doubt, fear of failure, or the belief that we are not enough. Insecurity, however, is not just an internal struggle. It deeply affects how we perceive and respond to the world around us. One of the most common and destructive outcomes of insecurity is the way it breeds contempt, both within ourselves and toward others. When we are insecure, we often feel threatened by the success, confidence, or happiness of others. And in those moments of fear, jealousy, or envy, we can allow contempt to take root in our hearts. Contempt is a feeling of disdain or superiority over others, and it often emerges when we feel small or inferior. It's not just about dislike, it's about putting someone down to elevate ourselves. This often happens when we compare ourselves to others, and when we feel that we fall short. Rather than recognizing our own unique value, we may begin to belittle those around us. We may feel that if we can diminish others, we can somehow protect ourselves from feeling inadequate. However, this only deepens the insecurity, creating a cycle where contempt feeds the very feelings we are trying to avoid. Insecure individuals often struggle with their sense of self-worth. When they see someone else succeeding or excelling, rather than celebrating that success or being inspired by it, they may feel threatened. Instead of seeing another person's accomplishments as a testament to what is possible, they may interpret it as a reflection of their own perceived lack. In those moments, their insecurity morphs into contempt, because they may believe that someone else's success diminishes their own chances or relevance. Instead of lifting others up, they push them down, all to protect themselves from confronting their own feelings of inadequacy. Insecurity often leads to the need for validation from others. When we are insecure, we tend to seek approval, constantly looking outside ourselves for signs that we are good enough. When we don't receive that validation, or when someone else seems to be getting attention or recognition, it can trigger feelings of resentment and even contempt. We may begin to see others as competition, as threats to our own sense of worth. This is why insecurity can often breed contempt in relationships. whether personal or professional, instead of appreciating the talents and qualities of others, we may feel as though their success highlights our own shortcomings. What's crucial to understand is that insecurity distorts our view of the world. It convinces us that we are not enough and that others are somehow better or more deserving. In these moments of feeling lesser, contempt can rise as a defense mechanism. But the reality is that contempt is a shield that only makes us more vulnerable. It does not protect us from our insecurity, it deepens it. The more we place ourselves above others in an attempt to feel better about ourselves, the more isolated and disconnected we become. Rather than addressing our insecurities and working on healing them, we use contempt as a way to avoid facing the discomfort of being less than. Ironically, the more we allow insecurity to breed contempt, the more we lose the ability to form authentic connections with others. Contempt is toxic. It erodes trust and makes true understanding impossible. It keeps us at arm's length from the very people who could help us heal our wounds and build our confidence. By constantly viewing others with disdain, we limit our ability to see the value in those around us, which in turn reinforces our belief that we don't have value either. Insecure individuals often keep themselves in a cycle of isolation and judgment, never fully allowing themselves to experience the richness of meaningful relationships. The key to breaking this cycle of insecurity and contempt lies in recognizing that our worth is not dependent on comparison or external validation. True confidence comes from within, from accepting who we are without needing to diminish others in the process. When we stop viewing others as threats or sources of envy and instead see them as fellow human beings with their own struggles, we can begin to heal the insecurities that fuel contempt. By embracing our own strengths and weaknesses, by learning to love ourselves without seeking approval from outside, we free ourselves from the toxic patterns of insecurity and contempt. Insecurity doesn't have to lead to contempt. It can be the starting point for self-awareness and growth. When we acknowledge our insecurities, we can take steps to address them with kindness and compassion, both for ourselves and others. The path to overcoming insecurity is not about making others feel small, but about realizing that we are enough as we are, and that everyone has their own journey to navigate. By transforming our insecurity into self-acceptance, we create the space for love, understanding, and true connection. Jealousy is a deeply rooted emotion, one that can creep into our hearts without us even fully realizing it. It starts as a quiet feeling of longing or envy, but if left unchecked, it can quickly morph into something far more destructive: hatred. Jealousy arises when we compare ourselves to others and perceive that they have something we lack or desire. It can be triggered by a person's success, their confidence, their relationships, or even their possessions. In those moments, when we feel like we are falling short or being left behind, jealousy begins to take hold, and with it, the potential for hatred. What makes jealousy so dangerous is that it is not simply about wanting what someone else has, it's about the belief that their success or happiness somehow diminishes our own. When we feel envious, we start to see others not as individuals living their own lives, but as threats to our sense of self-worth. We may convince ourselves that they have what we could never attain. And in doing so, we begin to resent them. Jealousy takes on a negative energy. It fuels the narrative that we are less than, that we are inadequate, and that the only way to feel better is to tear others down, even if only in our minds. Jealousy often breeds hatred because it taps into our insecurities. It highlights the gaps between where we are and where we want to be. And instead of motivating us to improve, it makes us feel bitter and resentful toward those who seem to have achieved what we desire. The more we compare ourselves, the more we feel trapped in our own limitations. As this feeling intensifies, the jealousy transforms into something more malicious. What was once a desire to have what someone else has becomes a desire for them to lose it or to fail. We want them to feel the same inadequacy we feel, and that's where hatred begins to emerge. This emotion is particularly insidious because it's not always outwardly visible. People who harbor jealousy may never openly express their feelings. Instead, it simmers beneath the surface. influencing their behavior in subtle ways. They may become passive-aggressive, make cutting remarks, or distance themselves emotionally. In other cases, jealousy can manifest in more overt actions, undermining someone's achievements, spreading rumors, or trying to sabotage their success. But regardless of how it's expressed, jealousy always has one common denominator. It stems from a sense of lack and the belief that someone else's gain is a reflection of our own inadequacies. What's also crucial to recognize is that jealousy is often rooted in a deep sense of fear. Fear of not being good enough. Fear of being overlooked or left behind. When we see someone else achieving something we desire, it can trigger the fear that we might never reach that level, or worse, that we are incapable of achieving it. This fear reinforces our negative feelings toward them. Instead of seeing their success as proof of what is possible, we see it as proof of our own limitations. And this fear, when mixed with jealousy, can ignite a fire of hatred that consumes us, causing us to direct our anger towards someone who, in truth, has done nothing to harm us. Jealousy also stems from the way we define success. When we place too much emphasis on external markers like wealth, status, or relationships, we run the risk of measuring our worth by comparison. We see someone with more, someone doing better, and we feel as though we're falling behind. But the truth is, success is subjective. It's not a finite resource. Just because someone else has achieved something we desire doesn't mean there's less of it available for us. When we realize that success and fulfillment are not limited commodities, we can shift our mindset away from jealousy and towards personal growth and self-empowerment. Hatred born of jealousy often distorts reality. We begin to view the person we are envious of as someone who doesn't deserve their success, believing that they are taking something that should have been ours. This is where jealousy becomes toxic. It shifts our focus away from our own path, making us fixated on the lives and achievements of others. We become so consumed with what they have that we lose sight of our own potential. Rather than using someone else's success as inspiration, we use it as ammunition to feed our own bitterness. To break free from the grip of jealousy, it's important to recognize it as a signpost, an indication that we may be neglecting our own growth and self-worth. Instead of allowing it to turn into hatred, we can use jealousy as an opportunity to examine why we feel inadequate and what steps we can take to improve our own lives. The more we learn to embrace our own journey without comparing it to others, and by recognizing that other people's success doesn't diminish our own potential, we can begin to celebrate their achievements instead of resenting them. Jealousy feeds on fear, insecurity, and comparison. It blinds us to the truth that our worth is not dependent on the accomplishments of others. When we allow jealousy to fester, it leads us to a place of hatred. A place where we are so focused on what others have that we lose sight of the greatness that already exists within us. Learning to let go of jealousy is not just about avoiding negative emotions. It's about freeing ourselves from the chains of comparison and cultivating an inner peace that allows us to support others without resentment, to be inspired without feeling threatened, and to thrive without fearing that someone else's success diminishes our own. Unresolved conflicts are one of the most destructive forces in human relationships. They start small, often as misunderstandings or minor disagreements, but when left unaddressed, they grow into something much more damaging. At first, it may seem easier to let things slide to avoid confrontation or to dismiss feelings in the hope that time will heal everything. However, unresolved conflicts rarely disappear on their own. Instead, they tend to fester and build, creating emotional distance, animosity, and resentment that can ultimately destroy relationships. When conflicts are unresolved, they don't simply vanish into thin air. Instead, they linger in the background of our interactions, quietly shaping our behaviors and thoughts. Even if we choose to ignore the issue on the surface, it has a way of affecting our mindset and emotions. The resentment grows, and what might have been a minor issue at the start becomes a larger source of tension. Every interaction with the person involved can become clouded by the unresolved conflict. making it harder to connect with them in a meaningful way. What was once a small misunderstanding now has the power to dominate your thoughts and feelings, preventing you from moving forward. This accumulation of unresolved issues can also result in passive aggression. Instead of confronting the conflict directly, we might find ourselves reacting in ways that are indirect or hurtful. Small dick sarcasm or even avoidance become ways to express the frustration that we are unwilling or unable to openly discuss. This behavior often leads to more conflict, creating a cycle of miscommunication and hurt that makes it even more difficult to address the real issue at hand. The longer the unresolved conflict persists, the more it becomes a wedge between individuals, preventing any real understanding or reconciliation from taking place. Emotions that are not addressed and resolved can quickly become toxic. When we leave conflicts unresolved, we tend to store up negative emotions. Anger, frustration, sadness, disappointment, and they begin to accumulate, often without us even realizing it. These emotions don't simply vanish. Over time, they turn into emotional burdens, weighing down on us and affecting how we view the other person. What may have started as a simple disagreement can, over time, feel like a betrayal or an irreparable harm. The longer the conflict remains unresolved, the more difficult it becomes to separate the initial issue from all the accumulated hurt, and the more intense the emotional charge becomes. The danger of unresolved conflicts is not just in the emotional impact, but in how they can shape our perception. As a conflict grows, we begin to view the person we're in conflict with through a distorted lens. We stop seeing them as they truly are, with their own complexities and vulnerabilities, and instead start to see them only through the lens of our anger and hurt. This distortion can lead to an overgeneralization of their behavior, where we only focus on the negative traits and actions. As a result, the person becomes less human in our eyes, more of an adversary or source of pain than someone we can work through things with. This makes reconciliation more difficult, as it becomes harder to approach them with empathy and understanding. Unresolved conflicts can cause a breakdown in communication. When people hold on to their grievances and avoid talking about their issues, communication starts to deteriorate. Instead of open, honest dialogue, relationships become characterized by silence, tension, or passive-aggressive behavior. Over time, this lack of communication creates an emotional and mental distance where both parties are unsure how to approach each other. The longer the silence stretches, the more difficult it becomes to reopen the lines of communication. And this silence becomes a breeding ground for further misunderstandings. Sometimes unresolved conflicts are a result of pride or fear. We may be unwilling to admit that we were wrong, or we may be afraid of the confrontation that resolution might require. The idea of facing the issue and discussing it openly may seem too daunting or uncomfortable, and as a result, we choose avoidance instead. This fear of confrontation often stems from a lack of trust or a belief that discussing the conflict will lead to more harm. But what is often overlooked is that not confronting the issue can lead to an even deeper rift. By avoiding the conflict, we rob ourselves of the chance to heal and move forward, creating an environment where resentment can grow unchecked. Unresolved conflicts also impact not just the relationship between the individuals involved, but also their own personal well-being. Holding on to negative emotions and unresolved issues takes a toll on mental health. The constant underlying stress of having an unaddressed issue can lead to anxiety, frustration, and even depression. It eats away at our sense of peace and leaves us feeling emotionally drained. The longer we hold on to these unresolved feelings, the more they can cloud our judgment and impact how we interact with others, creating a cycle of negativity that extends beyond the original conflict. The key to breaking free from the destructive cycle of unresolved conflict is to confront the issue head on, with openness, vulnerability, and a willingness to listen. It requires courage to face the discomfort of addressing hurt feelings and misunderstandings. But in doing so, we open the door to healing and growth. By discussing the problem openly, we have the opportunity to rebuild trust, understand one another's perspectives, and ultimately find a path toward resolution. When conflicts are resolved, they no longer control us. They no longer serve as a source of emotional weight or tension. Instead, they become learning experiences, opportunities to grow, to strengthen relationships, and to move forward with a deeper understanding of each other. Unresolved conflicts are an obstacle to both personal and relational growth. They keep us trapped in the past, preventing us from living fully in the present and building the future we want. By learning to address conflicts as they arise and fostering open, honest communication, we create the foundation for healthier, more meaningful relationships, free from the shadows of unresolved issues. The ego plays a significant and often misunderstood role in human behavior, shaping how we interact with the world and with others. It's the lens through which we perceive ourselves, and it influences how we view our worth, our status, and our place in the world. While the ego can serve as a protective mechanism, helping us navigate the challenges and complexities of life, it can also become a source of division, conflict, and internal struggle when it is inflated or misaligned with our true selves. At its core, the ego is a construct that shapes our identity, but when it takes over, it can distort our reality and our relationships, causing us to act out of pride, insecurity, or defensiveness. The role of the ego is often one of self-preservation. It is a part of us that seeks validation, recognition, and acknowledgement from others. The ego thrives on external approval, constantly measuring itself against the expectations of the world and the opinions of others. In a sense, it tries to carve out an identity based on comparison, seeking to stand out and be admired. This can lead us to place more value on how others perceive us than on how we truly perceive ourselves. The more the ego depends on external validation, the more vulnerable it becomes. When we don't receive the acknowledgement or recognition we expect, the ego feels threatened. And this threat can lead to defensiveness, resentment, or even hostility. The ego also tends to operate from a place of fear. Fear of not being enough, fear of failure, or fear of being judged. When we allow the ego to drive our decisions and actions, we often make choices based on how they will be perceived by others, rather than based on our authentic desires or values. This fear-driven behavior can cause us to overcompensate, try to control situations, or even engage in unhealthy competition with those around us. We become overly concerned with protecting the image we've created for ourselves, even if that image is not aligned with who we truly are at the core. This disconnect between the ego and our true self can cause a deep sense of dissatisfaction and anxiety, as we are constantly trying to live up to a version of ourselves that doesn't fully exist. The ego also plays a significant role in fueling conflict. When our ego is threatened, whether by criticism, comparison, or perceived slights, we react defensively, rather than seeing challenges or disagreements as opportunities for growth. We often view them as personal attacks. The ego wants to be seen as strong, right, or superior, and any challenge to this image can trigger a fight or flight response. Instead of engaging in open dialogue, we close ourselves off, becoming entrenched in our own perspective. We may become unwilling to listen, dismissing others' viewpoints as invalid, simply because they contradict our own beliefs or sense of self. Contribute this why overfunded ability to create. And when the ego is in control, we are often trapped in a cycle of pride and shame. On one hand, we may become overly attached to the idea of our own superiority, believing that we are better than others or deserving of special treatment. This sense of superiority can lead to arrogance and a lack of empathy for others. On the other hand, when the ego feels exposed or threatened, it can also cause us to experience shame, guilt, or feelings of inadequacy. The ego is fragile in this way, always seeking validation but never fully satisfied. This internal tug of war between pride and shame can prevent us from cultivating a sense of inner peace or authenticity, as we are constantly reacting to the external forces that challenge our self-ego. The ego also plays a crucial role in the creation of judgment. We are quick to judge others based on our own egoic standards of what is right, acceptable, or worthy. These judgments are often rooted in our own insecurities, beliefs, or experiences, and they can cloud our ability to see others as they truly are. When the ego is in charge, we view the world through a lens of us versus them, dividing people into categories of superior and inferior. This judgmental mindset fosters division, preventing us from experiencing true connection with others. It creates a world where we see people as objects to be evaluated and compared rather than as individuals with their own unique journeys and struggles. The ego is not inherently bad. It serves a purpose. It helps us navigate the world and establish a sense of self in relation to others. The challenge comes when the ego takes control of our lives in an unhealthy way. A balanced ego is one that is secure enough to recognize and embrace our worth without needing constant validation from others. It allows us to express ourselves authentically while remaining open to learning, growth, and feedback. A healthy ego is not threatened by challenges or differing opinions, but instead welcomes them as opportunities for growth and deeper understanding. The key to managing the role of the ego is when we become aware of when the ego is driving our behavior, we can take a step back and assess whether our actions are coming from a place of authenticity or from a desire to protect an image. We can ask ourselves, is this action coming from fear or love? Is this decision motivated by a genuine desire to serve, or is it about maintaining control or gaining approval? By examining our motivations and recognizing when the ego is leading us astray, we can make more conscious choices and cultivate a sense of inner peace that is not dependent on external validation. The role of the ego in our lives is to help us define ourselves, but it is crucial that we do not let it define us completely. By learning to live in harmony with our ego, recognizing its role without allowing it to take over, we can experience greater authenticity, peace, and connection with others. It is not about eliminating the ego, but rather about understanding its influence and not allowing it to control our actions, our relationships, or our self-worth. When we can do this, we can transcend the limitations that the ego imposes on us and create a life that is driven by authenticity, compassion, and true self-awareness. Failure to communicate is one of the most common and destructive issues in human relationships, whether personal, professional, or social. Communication is the cornerstone of understanding, connection, and collaboration. Without it, misunderstandings fester, feelings go unspoken, and opportunities for resolution are lost. When communication breaks down, it creates a void in which assumptions, misinterpretations, and resentments can easily grow. The failure to communicate effectively leads to frustration and isolation and can slowly erode trust and mutual respect between individuals. At the heart of communication lies the desire to be understood. Each person carries their own thoughts, emotions, and experiences, and communication is the bridge through which these can be shared. However, when communication is ineffective, this bridge collapses. A failure to communicate doesn't always mean that people aren't speaking to one another. In many cases, individuals are talking but not truly connecting. Words can be exchanged, but the meaning behind them is either unclear, ignored, or misunderstood. Often this occurs because people are not listening to one another, but rather waiting for their turn to speak. This lack of active listening creates an environment where individuals are more focused on expressing their own views than on truly understanding the perspective of the other person. A failure to communicate also arises when there is an unwillingness to express emotions, concerns, or desires clearly. In relationships, whether personal or professional, people often hold back important information for fear of conflict, rejection, or judgment. This lack of openness leads to a buildup of unspoken tension. Over time, feelings that should have been communicated early on grow into frustrations or misunderstandings that can be much harder to address. For example, a partner may be upset about something, but chooses not to speak about it, thinking it's too small to bring up. Eventually, this unspoken frustration accumulates, leading to emotional distance and possibly explosive arguments later on when the issue has grown out of proportion. In other cases, communication fails because individuals use vague language or make assumptions about what others know or understand. Instead of expressing their thoughts directly and clearly, people might drop hints, use sarcasm, or expect others to read between the lines. This often leads to confusion, as the person on the receiving end may misinterpret the message or feel unsure of what is truly meant. Miscommunication becomes even more pronounced when cultural or personal differences come into play, as what one person believes is clear and straightforward may be perceived entirely differently by someone from a different background or with a different perspective. One of the most common consequences of failing to communicate is the creation of conflict. When people don't express their needs or feelings, it often results in frustration as one party feels unheard or misunderstood. This can escalate into arguments, resentment, or emotional withdrawal. The longer the failure to communicate continues, the more entrenched the conflict becomes, and the harder it is to repair. Instead of addressing issues as they arise, individuals might allow them to grow into a larger problem. In this way, a simple misunderstanding can spiral into a full-blown conflict, not because the issues themselves are so severe, but because they were not addressed and resolved in a timely and effective manner. The failure to communicate often breeds a sense of distrust. When important information is withheld, or when people feel that they are not being communicated with openly, they may start to question the motives of others. In relationships where there is a lack of transparency, individuals might feel insecure or suspicious, interpreting silence or evasiveness as deceit or dishonesty. Even if the intention behind the failure to communicate is innocent, such as avoiding unnecessary conflict, the result is the same: a breakdown of trust. Trust is the foundation of any strong relationship, and once it begins to erode, it becomes increasingly difficult to rebuild. Another important aspect of communication failure is the role of technology. In today's world, many people rely on digital communication, text, emails, social media posts, as their primary means of interacting with others. While these tools can be convenient, they often lack the nuance and depth of face-to-face or even phone conversations. Written messages can be easily misinterpreted, and tone can be lost in the absence of vocal inflections or body language. What may seem like a harmless comment in a text message can be taken in an entirely different way, especially when context is missing. The reliance on quick, impersonal forms of communication can lead to deeper misunderstandings, leaving emotions and intentions unclear. A failure to communicate is often rooted in fear. People may fear confrontation, judgment, or rejection, and so they choose silence or avoidance instead of open discussion. This fear is particularly common in situations where individuals are unsure of how their message will be received, or when they're worried that expressing their true feelings might lead to conflict or hurt. However, while silence may seem like the safer option in the moment, it only prolongs the tension and allows the underlying issue to fester. It's often the very avoidance of communication that leads to greater emotional pain and relational breakdown. The lack of communication can also cause individuals to become isolated. When people fail to express themselves clearly or fail to listen to others, they begin to withdraw, whether emotionally or physically. In personal relationships, this isolation might manifest as emotional distance, where one or both partners feel that their needs are not being met or that their concerns are not valued. In a professional setting, failure to communicate can create a lack of collaboration and understanding, leading to a loss of productivity, disengagement, and frustration. Without regular and clear communication, people start to feel as though they are facing challenges alone, without the support or understanding of those around them. Failure to communicate is a barrier to connection. It prevents us from truly knowing one another, from understanding each other's desires, fears, and dreams. It keeps us stuck in a cycle of misinterpretation and emotional distance, hindering the possibility of growth, resolution, and deeper understanding. The key to overcoming this failure is not just about speaking more, but about speaking with clarity, empathy, and openness. It requires vulnerability, a willingness to be honest, and the patience to truly listen and understand. Only then can communication become a tool that bridges the gaps between us, allowing for stronger, healthier relationships built on trust, mutual respect, and shared understanding. Accountability and humility are two core principles that, when practiced together, can transform how we interact with ourselves and others. Accountability involves taking responsibility for our actions, decisions, and the outcomes that follow. It's about owning our mistakes, acknowledging when we are wrong, and understanding the impact our actions have on the world around us. Humility, on the other hand, is the ability to remain grounded, acknowledging that we are not perfect and that we do not have all the answers. Together, these qualities create a foundation for personal growth, effective leadership, and meaningful relationships. At its core, accountability requires a sense of self-awareness. It's about being able to recognize when our actions align or misalign with our values and goals. Being accountable means not shifting blame onto others or external circumstances, but facing the truth of our own behavior, whether it's positive or negative. This honesty with ourselves is the first step towards self-improvement. When we hold ourselves accountable, we actively engage in a process of reflection that allows us to learn from our mistakes, correct our course, and strive to do better. Without accountability, we remain stagnant, caught in a cycle of denial or defensiveness, and unable to grow or evolve as individuals. Humility plays a critical role in making accountability possible. Humility requires us to let go of the ego and acknowledge that we are not infallible. It's a mindset that encourages learning rather than pride. When we approach life with humility, we are open to feedback, willing to accept criticism, and able to admit when we do not have all the answers. It's easy to become defensive when we feel threatened or when our actions are called into question, but humility allows us to set aside our pride and listen with an open heart. Humility reminds us that every person, regardless of their background or status, has something valuable to offer, and it encourages us to stay open to learning from everyone we encounter. Accountability without humility can easily become an exercise in self-criticism or perfectionism. Without the balance of humility, the desire to be accountable might lead to feelings of inadequacy or guilt that are not productive. Instead of using mistakes as opportunities for growth, we might use them as proof of our failure or worthlessness. Humility acts as a counterbalance in these moments, reminding us that making mistakes is part of the human experience. Humility helps us understand that our worth is not determined by our success or our failures, but by the integrity with which we face them. Humility also fosters a sense of empathy toward others, which is an essential component of accountability in relationships. When we approach others with humility, we are less likely to be judgmental or dismissive. We understand that they too are flawed and make mistakes, and this allows us to hold them accountable without a sense of superiority. Rather than criticizing others harshly, humility helps us communicate in a way that is constructive, compassionate, and understanding. It helps us recognize that everyone has their own struggles, and that accountability should not come from a place of judgment, but from a desire for mutual growth and improvement. When both accountability and humility are embraced, they create an environment in which trust can flourish. In personal relationships, when we hold ourselves accountable for our actions and do so with humility, we show those around us that we are committed to honesty and growth. This openness creates a safe space for others to do the same. In a workplace or community setting, leaders who embody both accountability and humility set an example for others. They admit when they don't have all the answers, ask for help when necessary, and take responsibility for the outcomes of their decisions. This type of leadership encourages others to follow suit, leading to a culture of trust, collaboration, and mutual respect. Practicing both accountability and humility can be challenging, particularly in environments that reward arrogance or self-promotion. Society often values confidence over humility, and it's easy to believe that we must always appear strong and infallible to be respected or successful. Yet, when we allow ourselves to be vulnerable and admit when we've made mistakes, We show that we are human, and in doing so, we invite others to do the same. There's a strength in humility that many fail to recognize. Humility doesn't mean weakness. It means having the courage to be honest about who we are with all of our strengths and imperfections. It's about being willing to grow and to admit that we can do better, rather than being stuck in the false belief that we are already perfect. In relationships, the failure to embrace both accountability and humility can lead to the deterioration of trust and intimacy. When we fail to take responsibility for our actions, it creates distance and resentment. If we lack humility, we may believe that our perspective is the only valid one, leading to a breakdown in communication and understanding. Without these qualities, conflict often escalates rather than resolves, as neither party is willing to truly listen or make changes. But when both accountability and humility are present, conflicts can be resolved with mutual respect and growth. Each person is willing to examine their own role in the issue, take ownership of their actions, and approach the situation with a desire to learn from it rather than to win or be right. On a broader scale, accountability and humility also impact the way we contribute to society. When we take responsibility for our actions and acknowledge the interconnectedness of our world, we become more conscious of the impact we have on others. Humility allows us to see the value in every individual, regardless of their background or status, and to approach societal issues with empathy and understanding. It reminds us that no one person has all the answers, and that collective wisdom and cooperation are essential for progress. Accountability in this context means recognizing that we all have a role to play in creating positive change, and humility ensures that we approach the task with openness and a willingness to learn. Accountability and humility are not just individual virtues. They are essential for building healthier, more effective communities. They are the glue that holds relationships together, the foundation for leadership that inspires trust, and the keys to personal growth. By embracing both accountability and humility, we move beyond ego-driven behaviors and instead cultivate a mindset of continuous learning, compassion, and integrity. These qualities allow us to navigate life with authenticity and wisdom, grounded in a deep understanding that growth, while sometimes challenging, is always possible when we take responsibility for our actions and remain open to learning from others. Forgiveness is one of the most powerful and transformative acts a person can engage in. It has the ability to heal not only relationships, but also the soul. When we forgive, we free ourselves from the emotional burden of resentment, anger, and bitterness. These emotions, if left unchecked, can weigh heavily on our hearts, clouding our judgment and limiting our ability to move forward. Forgiveness allows us to release these negative emotions, offering us the opportunity to live a life of peace, clarity, and freedom. At its core, forgiveness is not about excusing or condoning harmful behavior. It is not about saying that what happened was acceptable or that the person who wronged us doesn't need to be held accountable for their actions. Forgiveness is a personal decision to let go of the hold that the offense has over us. It's about choosing to release ourselves from the grip of negative emotions that have the power to define our lives and interactions. When we forgive, we are not doing it for the person who hurt us. We are doing it for ourselves, to reclaim our peace of mind and emotional well-being. The power of forgiveness lies in its ability to transform how we see both the other person and ourselves. Holding on to resentment and anger traps us in a cycle of negativity. We continue to revisit the pain and disappointment, often reliving the hurt in our minds. Every time we replay the offense, we perpetuate the harm that was done to us. In contrast, forgiveness allows us to break free from this cycle. It gives us the opportunity to see the situation with fresh eyes, not as a source of pain, but as a lesson or an opportunity for growth. By letting go of our bitterness, we stop allowing the actions of others to control our emotional state. We take back our power and choose to move forward with a sense of inner peace. Forgiveness also has the power to heal relationships. When we hold on to grudges, we create walls between ourselves and others. These walls, built of hurt and unresolved feelings, prevent connection and intimacy. Even if we interact with the person who hurt us, the relationship is often strained as the unresolved hurt lurks beneath the surface. Forgiveness, on the other hand, allows us to dismantle these walls and open ourselves up to rebuilding trust and understanding. It doesn't mean that the relationship will immediately return to its previous state, but it creates a space where healing can begin. Through forgiveness, we acknowledge the pain, but we also recognize that holding onto that pain indefinitely does not serve us. We open ourselves to the possibility of moving forward, whether that means rekindling the relationship or simply finding closure. One of the greatest misconceptions about forgiveness is that it means we have to forget what happened. However, forgetting is not necessary for forgiveness. We don't have to erase the memory of the offense or pretend it didn't hurt. Forgiveness is about choosing not to let the past dictate our present and future. It's about making a conscious decision to no longer allow the offense to define our emotions, actions, or relationships. While we may always remember what happened, forgiveness allows us to move forward with a sense of liberation and without carrying the weight of that past hurt. Forgiveness also has a profound impact on our own mental and physical health. Holding on to anger and resentment can have toxic effects on our bodies. Chronic stress, anxiety, and depression are often exacerbated by the emotional burden of unresolved anger. These emotions can manifest in physical symptoms such as headaches, fatigue, high blood pressure, and weakened immune systems. When we forgive, we release this emotional weight, leading to improved well-being. The act of forgiveness reduces stress, lowers anxiety, and can even contribute to better heart health. It is a powerful tool for self-care, offering not only emotional relief, but also physical healing. The process of forgiving, however, is not always easy. It often requires a deep level of vulnerability, introspection, and self-compassion. Sometimes the pain inflicted by others runs deep and the hurt feels insurmountable. In such cases, forgiveness may feel like an impossible task, but even in the most painful circumstances, forgiveness is still possible. It may take time, and it may require seeking help from a therapist or trusted friend. It may involve acknowledging the pain, allowing ourselves to grieve, and then making the conscious decision to release the hurt. Forgiveness does not mean we condone what happened. It simply means that we are no longer willing to carry the burden of that pain. In addition to its personal benefits, forgiveness can also contribute to the healing of communities and societies. When individuals and groups choose forgiveness over vengeance, peace can emerge. History has shown us that the ability to forgive has the power to transform entire nations and societies. Whether in the aftermath of war, conflict, or systemic injustice, forgiveness offers the possibility of reconciliation and rebuilding. By choosing to forgive, we break the cycle of retaliation and violence, creating space for understanding, healing, and ultimately progress. Forgiveness is a collective act that can restore social harmony, rebuild trust, and heal wounds that span generations. The power of forgiveness is transformative because it enables us to reclaim our power and peace. It allows us to heal from the wounds of the past and free ourselves from the chains of negative emotions. It transforms our relationships, enabling us to rebuild trust and connection. It offers a path to emotional and physical well-being, and it plays a crucial role in healing not only individuals but communities as well. Forgiveness is not always easy, and it does not happen overnight. It is a process, one that requires patience, self-awareness, and a willingness to let go. However, once we embrace it, forgiveness becomes a powerful force that changes our lives and the world around us. Forgiveness is a transformative act that holds the power to heal, empower, and liberate. It frees us from the shackles of resentment and anger, allowing us to reclaim our peace, rebuild relationships, and foster growth. While it may not always be easy and sometimes takes time, the choice to forgive is ultimately a choice to take control of our own well-being. When we forgive, we no longer allow the past to define us, and we pave the way for a brighter future filled with love, understanding, and compassion. Remember, forgiveness is not about excusing the wrongs of others, but about setting ourselves free from the emotional burden of pain and anger. It's a gift we give to ourselves, and in doing so, we also give the world around us the gift of healing. We have the power to transform not only our own lives, but also the lives of those we touch, by choosing to forgive, to move forward, and to embrace the strength that comes from letting go. Forgiveness is not a sign of weakness, but of immense courage. And when we choose it, we create a ripple effect that can change the world for the better.